As long as we continue to hold those things precious, I think we will continue to be the greatest story ever written in the history of beauty.
Today, I'm speaking with Kory Marchisotto, CMO of e.l.f. Beauty, a fast-growing, fast-moving mass cosmetics brand with its finger on the pulse of popular culture.
I was brought here under the banner of bold change agenda. We knew we had this incredible piece of content that was going to be a wave maker. What stage would be big enough? And we looked at the calendar and we saw that the big game was in 3 weeks. And I was like, whoa, that's a challenge.
So important that they stay on track.
Second down.
What do you do on that condensed time frame?
So I go to the CEO with this crazy idea, which I've done a lot of in the last 5 years. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, you're never going to make that happen.
Pressure coming. In trouble.
And I went back to the founders and thought about how many no's they faced. In the face of opposition, I will take the path of most resistance. I'm going to make it happen.
Loaded up, taking a shot, looking for A.J. Brown. He's got it. Touchdown.
We really wanted to bust the myth that beauty doesn't belong at the big game.
Why are you allowed to break the rules and no one else is?
We e.l.f. the rules, Ben. One way in which we break the rule book is...
Welcome to Top CMO. I'm chatting with Kory Marchisotto, CMO at e.l.f. Beauty. And one of the things that when we've chatted before, Kory, that I love about how you talk about e.l.f. is that you break all the rules and you're allowed to break all the rules. And that's at the core of the brand. So for those people who don't know, very popular beauty brand, has big following on TikTok, lots of big following with Gen Z. Why are you allowed to break the rules and no one else is?
We e.l.f. the rules, Ben. We e.l.f. the rules. My personal favorite e.l.f.ism, and I'm going to get you into e.l.f.isms by the end of this podcast or maybe in the middle, is why the e.l.f. not? And that really goes back to the origin of e.l.f. And it's fundamental that we start there because we're watering the roots of disruption in this company every single day. So back in 2004, e.l.f. was started by a father-son duo who were entrepreneurs. They didn't know anything about beauty. What they knew was they were entrepreneurs with a bulldozer mentality looking for a white space opportunity. And they came up with this crazy idea of selling $1 cosmetics over the internet in 2004. They met with naysayers, doubters, and everybody who told them it's impossible. What's impossible? Well, first and foremost, you can't create prestige quality cosmetics and sell it for $1. 2, you cannot sell color cosmetics over the internet. And 3, even if you figured out how to do 1 and 2, you'll never be able to make that a profitable business. And here we are 20 years later, 18 consecutive quarters of growth, 18 consecutive quarters of market share gains, $1 billion brand. We've even exceeded our founders' wildest expectation. And the reason we do that is because they gave us permission from day one to take the rule book and throw it out the window.
And so how does that reflect? Now, you have a unique role. I mean, you are CMO, but also you have oversight over elements of product innovation, many other parts of the business as well. So let's start with marketing and then we can build from there. What's a way that you throw out the rule book on marketing about what a beauty brand is supposed to do, how a beauty brand is supposed to behave, how a beauty brand is supposed to be, a word I know you don't love, on trend?
So there's a couple of things, and I'll start with my journey 5 years ago when I took on this responsibility and this transformation. I was brought here under the banner of bold change agenda. e.l.f. at that point was 15 years old and looking to ready the rocket ship for the next 15 years of growth. And we are in what I would call a constant phase of transformation, which is one way in which we break the rule book. Is every day when we wake up, we treat it as day one. Whatever happened yesterday is not going to be true tomorrow. So we need to write a new playbook every single day. So having that like a virgin mentality is one way we break the rules. Another thing is when I started and I checked in with all of my marketing gurus and everybody I knew in the space, and I asked them, what was going to be fundamental for making sure that I could make a high level of impact in a small amount of time. And all of them gave me the rule book around, you have to paint a picture of who is your demographic, and you have to call a sweet spot, and you have to give it a name, and you have to say Sally Smith, who shops here and is this age and this psychographic, so on and so forth, and then build around that. That is typically how marketing works. So I took that rule book and threw it out the window, and I'll tell you why. Because it didn't feel right. What didn't feel right about it is the size and scale of this brand and the way it had universal appeal. It could talk to an 11-year-old the same way it could talk to a 60-year-old. So I said, well, how am I going to paint that picture? So what I decided to do is say, e.l.f. is for every eye, lip, and face. Keyword every, capital E, capital V, capital E, capital R, capital Y. And everybody told me why that shouldn't be done. And I went back to the founders and thought about how many no's they faced and said, you know what? In the face of opposition, I will take the path of most resistance. And it is definitely the best decision that we ever made. And right now, when we look at our audience, it is vast, it is wide, it is global.
And what's interesting is that a lot of people will, we'll take one marketing initiative you're known for, which is a Super Bowl commercial featuring the actress Jennifer Coolidge. And for those who haven't seen the commercial, just to describe it, I mean, I think she's trying on cosmetics, and it's like everything's sticking to her, right? Like everything's like it's sticky to her hand, and she tries to pick up the phone, and the phone sticks to her face, and then she needs to go to something else, and everything. Pretty soon, she's like walking out, and I think the glass door is stuck to her, so everything's sticky. And usually, most people would treat a Super Bowl ad is that's going to be a really big expense. That's a big initiative. That's our tent pole. I mean, in fact, on this podcast, we probably describe it as that's the tent pole moment. And then they would take that tent pole moment and say, okay, let's build out social around it and PR around it, and let's do some influencer stuff and let's activate. In your case, it's really interesting because really your tent pole moment happens on TikTok first, and the Super Bowl ad is how you kind of flesh it out. It's the opposite. So take us through the origination of that. Maybe we can show some of how that's a little bit different than how a typical beauty company would market.
For sure. And there's so many ways that it's different, starting with the time it took us to do it. So from inception to completion was 3 weeks. 3 weeks from inception to completion. Most companies take 12 to 18 months, usually closer to the 18-month mark. And nobody can actually believe we were able to do what we did. But if you know e.l.f., it actually makes a lot of sense. So I'll run it through the pipes for you in what I call our 4-part magic recipe. The first one is tune the e.l.f. in. And this is really where you look at what are all the signals telling me. And there are a couple of things that were coming through loud and clear. The first one was the power of this little green machine.
In green machine, you're holding up. People
yes,
say, I mean, and
I'm
I have one
up,
here,
sorry,
so I'm holding
primer.
up. It's Power Grip Primer. It's why do you call this a little green machine, and why is it so powerful?
So Power Grip Primer is a sticky primer, and it will stick the makeup to your face for all day wear. Well, what was really fascinating and why I call it the little green machine is primer, which is where e.l.f. has a real strong suit, is a category 13. What does that mean? It means in all of beauty sales, it is the 13th biggest category, okay? The first category is mascara by a landslide. The second category is foundation.
So you got to go in terms of types of products down 13 spots.
13 spots.
So this is not your lead. You're not building a brand around check out our primer.
So here's what's really amazing about that. My head of insights called me and said, you're never going to believe this. Power Grip Primer is the number 2 SKU in all of mass cosmetics. So to have an item launch in a category 13 and actually become the number 2 SKU in all of mass cosmetics is amazing. So I said to her, holy elfing moly, how far are we from number 1? And she said, K-Boss, they all call me K-Boss. K-Boss, 1 activation, you'll be number 1 SKU in all of America in mass cosmetics. And I was like, whoa, that's a challenge. So then we moved into, well, what are people loving about this? what is actually going on here that is creating a phenomenon that would allow this to be true? So we stuck our head in the sky, which is step 2. And we put our head in the sky and we said, well, what are all the stars that are shining? And the biggest star that were shining was the entertainment value of this item. People were sticking their hands to their face. They were sticking paper. They were seeing if their brush would stick to their hand. So we realized that what we had here was actually the power of the entertainment value of the product.
Which is and just to jump in, which is interesting because you come to that insight probably from whatever you want to call it, listening or engaging with your community or paying attention or whatever it is. Usually that doesn't come from like, okay, we're doing our like brand persona study. And what are the, right? And like, okay, it's like, we're very entertained, right? Because it doesn't usually work like that. So that's interesting. That's an insight. And in some ways, people are figuring out how to use the product in an unintended way to get additional value that you didn't expect.
And we also found they didn't even know it was called Power Grip Primer. They called it Sticky AF, Magic Sticky Face Potion. We started to watch the conversations that were happening among the communities that created this obsession and this cult-like following. And we're like, whoa, there is something magical happening here that we have to tap into. So then we said, okay, well, now we know it's the entertainment value. Well, who could we pair the stickiest star in beauty, holding up my Power Grip Primer, with the stickiest cultural icon right now? And what we saw in that moment was Jennifer Coolidge. She had just received her Golden Globe Award. And in her acceptance speech, she said that her dream role was to play a dolphin. That for us was the dolphin signal. Dolphin is glossy glass-like skin, which you will get from Power Grip Primer. So we created dolphin face. And then the third star that we needed to see to create a constellation, which would tell us to go to step 3 in this magic recipe, is what stage would be big enough for the stickiest star in beauty and the stickiest cultural icon. And we looked at the calendar and we saw that the big game was in 3 weeks. Now it was time for us to go to step 3, which is put your feet on the ground and actually make this happen.
Right. Well, and at that point, and I've been in many conversations. We have a global marketing agency also. I can tell you where the momentum will be. The momentum will be, this is amazing, great idea, let's do it. And then for next year, because we cannot, right? Like, let's get it going now. We're not going to do it. And there's a bunch of stuff going in. And I've even had, things almost point like, we can't even do the contract fast enough with you as our agency to do it because it's going to go through legal reviews and all this stuff. We can't really do it. Let's just work on the next year. So why didn't you just work on the next year?
That's not how we roll. This is called e.l.f. speed, which is the 4th pillar of our magic recipe. Move at the speed of culture. So you have to have a culture of innovation inside your organization. And I need to have the support of my C-suite peers as well as the CEO. So I go to the CEO with this crazy idea, which I've done a lot of in the last 5 years. And he looked at me because he knows no is my fiercest motivator. And he said, yeah, you're never going to make that happen. You know when the big game is? I go, yeah. And he goes, yeah, you're never going to make that happen. And I'm like, I'm going to make it happen. And he goes, good luck. And we made it happen. And it's a truly exceptional journey because even all of my CMO peers ask me if I planted the seed for Jennifer Coolidge at the Golden Globes. And I was like, you still don't get it. No, we didn't plant the seed. She sent the dolphin signal and we were the only company who responded in real time.
Well, and so how did the, one of the things, and just to take a moment to talk about Super Bowl ads, that people try to leverage and that is challenging in real time. But you have certain brands that do it well and do different things that are surprising, but is building out everything else around the Super Bowl ad itself, right? It's like it's this moment, you have the ad, but there's a lot of organic coverage. There's a lot of other things you can do with it. What was your thinking there? How do you build out kind of like all the other assets or you're like, no, we don't have to. Let's just do a great job with the spot. What do you do on that condensed time frame?
It was definitely both. We knew we had this incredible piece of content that was going to be a wave maker. We knew it. Jennifer Coolidge was the hottest thing, the hottest cultural icon. We knew that this product was taking off across the board and became this massive phenomenon. So we knew we had the wave maker on our hands. But we still have to create content across 10 platforms, 365 days a year. So we did need to build surround sound amplification, which we were able to do in a very small amount of time. But if you back the truck up just a beat, because I think it's really important to talk about why were we even at the big game and why was that even a consideration? Because all of this is very strategic, just done in a very compressed timeline. When we looked at the big game spots, we saw that there's over 100 some odd spots in every game, of which 0.00001% are beauty. And I said, okay, well, that makes sense if there's no women in the audience. How many women are in the audience? You're talking about over 100 million spectators, of which 50% are women. So it just doesn't make any sense that brands in the beauty sphere are not recognizing that there is an entire community of people here who will have a high receptivity at that moment in time. So we really wanted to bust the myth that beauty doesn't belong at the big game.
And to bring it a little bit full circle, we talked about throwing out the rule book. You had thrown out the rule book about sort of the personas and the types that sort of said everyone. If you're going to market to everyone, Super Bowl is kind of everyone, right? At that point. So it makes sense for what had already transpired.
And the other thing is, I love the iceberg metaphor. What people saw on the surface was this incredible campaign that was very sticky and had an unbelievable sticky factor. People are still talking about it nearly 1 year later. What happened under is even more interesting. Why did Jennifer receive the e.l.f. call and respond with such positivity and such eagerness to make this happen? The answer to that question is really fascinating, and all marketers should really always think about the story behind the story behind the story behind the story, because a series of things had to be true in order for that moment to be true. Jennifer Coolidge's social media manager was an e.l.f. evangelist, and he found a home for himself in our brand on TikTok years before. He was enamored by our Eyes, Lips, Face song campaign. It was the tipping point that got him into our brand. He then realized that he was invited to express his true self and live his bold truth on our platform. And he really embraced our brand. And as an evangelist, he started to bring it into Camp Coolidge. So he introduced everybody to our Halo Glow, to our Power Grip Timer, to the fact that we deliver this incredible premium quality at this value. So when the call came in, Jennifer was like, e.l.f.? I love e.l.f. True story. But that all needed to be true in order for that moment to be true.
Well, and there you go. For anyone listening, if you want to know if a celebrity endorser or ambassador or influencer is really on board, you'd be like, you got 3 weeks until the Super Bowl. Are you going to make this happen? There you go. That's your test. If you're not willing to make this happen, then clearly you don't believe in our brand. In this case, you do. So okay, you had something that resonated, familiar with the brand. And one of the things I love, and we've chatted previously, you've mentioned, is that even things on the cutting room floor from that film shoot, including just some chat around the sort of the beauty vanity there, and an off comment that the celebrity, in this case, Jennifer Coolidge, makes, is used as content, but actually is used as product inspiration. And I think that relates to what is one of the interesting roles about your job. And there's a few other examples. Lego is one, the CMO over there, who has some innovation responsibility in addition to marketing. But talk about the cutting room floor and how that fuels marketing innovation and product innovation.
We were on set in LA with Jennifer for 16 hours. And this was super high production, as you can imagine, with everything sticking a shower door to your face and all of the different cuts and pieces and parts. We basically created a movie in 30 seconds. And we had to do it fast, so everything happened across that one day. There was a moment in that day, it was late in the day. It's sort of that moment when you become a little bit slapstick, if you will. And she was at the vanity table and she just started riffing. And all of us, like, belly laughing. I got yelled at 5 times, thrown out of the room because I was laughing so hard and I couldn't control myself and they were trying to get it on camera. And when we watched all that footage after, we said, okay, let's get the big game commercial out and finish. And then let's sit with the stuff that had us all belly laughing and falling on the floor. And when we watched it again and again, we realized that this was an incredible content series that we needed to share with the world, because it was a moment she was having at the vanity table with herself in the mirror. And we took that and we used it as the inspiration to create a content series called Vanity Table Talk. And she was our first guest on our Vanity Table Talk series. Another incredible thing happened once we put Vanity Table Talk into our content platform is there was a moment in which she picked up our O-Face lipstick in a shade called Dirty Talk. And as she's putting it on, it just isn't quite right. And she says, if I was going to create my own lipstick, it would be just like this, but a little lighter, and I'd call it Dirty Pillows. So we went back to her and we said, let's talk about dirty pillows. You obviously had a vision. What was that vision? And we spent a lot of time with her. We sent down our innovation team and she told them about the creation of the perfect pout. And we created that perfect pout in a Dirty Pillows lip kit. And 6 months after the Super Bowl, we were able to put that to market, and it sold out in 2 hours. And we have a lot of very upset fans. So we are restocking it again in time for the holiday.
I see. And so the interesting thing about that is that if you're going to, act in real time, or if you're going to really truly not only listen to your community, but become a part of your community, it doesn't ever really stop, right? You don't ever really... And this is even the lesson for brands that I know brands, hire a lot of influencers now. And sometimes you look at influencers like, well, how do they create all this content? They're always on. They're just like driving in a car and they're shooting more content. It's because it doesn't ever really stop. It's a way of thinking. And once you embrace that, you kind of just need to roll with it, right? You don't ever get to be like, I'm taking a vacation. Now this week I'm creating content. Now I'm not creating content. Now I am. It's just a way of thinking, which is challenging for a lot of brands, right? To be able to do and with confidence and still avoid, make the legal department happy and the compliance department happy and the CFO happy with how you're spending money and all of that. So how is that culturally a way of thinking? Because you have a long history in the beauty industry, but not every brand or company you've worked at would be cut from that same cloth.
I had 20 years before I came to e.l.f. And I can tell you e.l.f. is a unicorn. There is no company that operates like this. And again, it goes back to our origins. We were born to disrupt. It's in our DNA. And creating and cultivating that renegade spirit, that bias for action, that entrepreneurship, that acting in real time, that bulldozer mentality that our founders had is fundamental to what we do and why we're so successful. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, we are the community. And that's a really important part I want to spend a little bit of time on, because I think this is a key differentiator. People say they are community first. And maybe for some that's true, but being community first can still mean I'm in an ivory tower and I'm looking down at the community and reports are bubbling up. And we put an action plan in place from the ivory tower on what we think people want. Or community starts with us being members of the community. And I think that's the key differentiator for e.l.f. I am a member of the community. Our C-suite is a member of the community. We leave the red tape, velvet ropes, and ivory towers and spending time feeding egos to everybody else. We get down, boots on the ground with our community, understanding their unique needs, wants, and desires. Let me give you a really good example that I love around running that through the pipes. A couple of years ago, we had launched a Jelly Pop collection, which is a beauty collection centered around watermelon. Okay. It was a one-shot. It came in, it went out. A couple of years later, every post we did, every content we created, people would be flooding into our community saying, bring back Jelly Pop, bring back Jelly Pop, bring back Jelly Pop. Jelly Pop was actually why we created this, because people loved the sticky factor of that original Jelly Pop primer. But some people didn't love the fragrance, so we created it fragrance-free and we called it Power Grip Primer. So the team serves me up these reports. I said, I don't want reports. I want to understand people. I have relationships with people, not reports. So let's get on a TikTok live and let me ask the community some questions. So I get on a TikTok live and I'm like, help me understand why you want Jelly Pop Primer. And they're like, oh, because it's sticky. And I'm like, great. Well, we made Power Grip Primer. That's sticky. And they go, yeah, but it's not pink. I go, well, we just made you the pink version. It's called Power Grip Primer Niacinamide. And they said, yeah, but it doesn't smell like watermelon. And I was like, okay, well, let me tell you, it's really complicated inside an organization in order to be able to make a product. So let's make a deal. Come on the journey with me through all the people who have to sign off on this. And if we achieve success and we eventually get to the CEO and he says yes, then we'll bring back Jelly Pop Primer. So we did the Jelly Pop Primer investigation.
Okay.
We went to see the CFO. We went to see our ops. We went to see our head of R&D together. And we did this over the series of a couple of weeks so they could understand the journey that one needs to go on in order to make this happen. And eventually we got to our CEO. Now you're talking about C-suites investing time with the community, having real dialogue, having real conversation. Our CEO himself spent 45 minutes on that TikTok live getting to know the community, answering questions they had about what does it mean to be a CEO. And he decided in that moment that they could have their Jelly Pop Primer back. And what was really amazing is a week later when people were saying, bring back Jelly Pop, the community that was on the TikTok live started responding for us, saying, we saw their CEO, he said yes.
Well, and it's one of the lessons too. I think back to prior career, I was an author. And one of the best things you could do as an author was if you wanted people to believe in your book and have a stake in your book and, buy your book on the first day, was let them have input into the book and become a stakeholder in it. So I remember do you prefer cover A or cover B or cover C? And what about this? Here's what we're thinking about including in it. Are we missing anything? And so you can co-create together. It's just difficult. It's maybe easier when you're an individual author and you can just kind of do that. But then you become a $1 billion brand. Things get harder. So how do you keep buy-in from everyone else? Or is it the brand so well known what you stand for now that of course the CEO is going to go on TikTok and talk about watermelon flavor with everyone and how that works? Of course, because internally the brand is strong what it represents. Or how do you keep that and don't lose that if you get exactly what you want, which is growth? You grow and you become a much bigger brand, go on to even more world domination, but you don't lose that along the way, which is something that's more with a small, scrappy startup type brand.
You have to have a team of people who believe head, heart, and soul in the vision, the mission, and the values of the organization, and continue to hire the humble and hungry people who are going to carry that vision, mission, and values with them every single day. And as long as you do that, you won't lose it. Here we are 20 years later. This brand is now 20 years old, or will be in a couple of months. And we're still talking about our founders. And I will tell the story about our founders in every single room I walk into, because those characteristics are what made us where we are today. It is those characteristics that we have to take with us every step of the journey and fiercely protect what it is that makes e.l.f., what it is that makes us unique and able to continue on this trajectory. And that started 20 years ago.
And Kory, what is something for those listening, and a lot of CMOs listen to this podcast, and I can imagine them, sort of saying, well, what about the things that don't work? If you're going to move at real time, right, there's going to be misfires, learnings. How do we get comfortable with that? So is there an example of something that you thought might work that didn't work? And how do you sort of build that into the culture too? Because you can't be working real time and be 100% right all the time. How does that work at e.l.f.?
We embrace what we call the fail forward. And we don't ever want to miss the benefit of a failure. And yes, I said failure is a benefit. Failure is a teacher. Failure is not a stop sign. It's actually a green light to move forward with greater learnings. And that is embedded in our culture. So again, we have to water those roots every day. We have to make sure we create the conditions necessary for innovation to happen. And that includes people not being afraid to fail. So we are testing and learning all the time. When you move at the speed that we move at, you have to be able to not get precious about a path that you drew and a road you thought you were on. You have to be able to get to the intersection and be like, oh, holy e.l.f, I thought it was a left, but you know what? It's actually not a left. I have to make a U-turn, go that way and go that way in order to get over there. And everybody has to be comfortable and not hold you to, well, in this PowerPoint deck that you showed me 9 months ago, there was this road that you painted and you're off the road. With us, we embrace that. We're like, that's right, because we thought we were supposed to make one turn, but once we got here, we realized it's another, so we're pivoting. And that's embedded in everything we do, and anybody around you in our organization would celebrate.
And is there an example of something that didn't work out that later led to maybe some learnings that maybe did work out, or what's something, where was there a misfire?
Sure. I wouldn't say that there's a big example of a misfire versus stuff that we evolve and transform over time. So we're usually on the right track, but we don't always get it right the first time. So we massage it over time. I'll give you an example. We really wanted to create an app, and we weren't so precious about it has to be perfect right from the beginning, and we have to spend 2 years developing. It was like, just take whatever is available now. And at that point, it was a wrapper, and we put a wrapper around our website and we made it an app. The experience was okay. The ratings and reviews weren't great. So rather than scrap it, we said, well, what needs to be true and over which course of time in order for this app to be a fundamental part of our business? So we evolved it over time to where it is today, which is a standalone technology platform where we now have 1.6 million downloads and a 4.8 star rating. So one could say that the first batch was a failure. I wouldn't say it's a failure. I would say it was a stepping stone to get to the place where we needed to be. And that also happens sometimes with our product creation, where we think that the finish is going to be perfect, or the delivery system or the componentry. And then we'll hear from our community like, hey, I love this, but you didn't quite nail this part. And then we put that on a track of what we call continuous improvement. And having that continuous improvement mindset allows us to do a lot of things that we can continue to perfect over time and continue to shape over time together with our community, taking their feedback, taking their insights, taking their usage patterns and behaviors, and then translating that to increasing performance over time.
Well, which I think is one of the maybe sometimes overlooked aspects of having, in your words, a bias towards action, or basically just acting quickly, is that by doing that, in balance, you're accumulating experience faster. Why? Because you're acting quickly. You're doing a lot of things. You're able to learn faster. And I know you've spoken before at e.l.f, and it's your belief that at e.l.f, you can do 5 years of marketing at another beauty brand you do in 1 year. But maybe that's because if you are accumulating experiences at 5 times the rate, you can learn from them 5 times faster and deploy them as well. And sometimes people forget that a bias towards action, it's not just the result of your action, it's the experience you gain at faster pace.
That is a brilliant strategic distillation of how we operate inside our organization.
Okay, well, I try to be, every once in a while, I try to do something brilliant. Thank you, Kory. To wrap up, I have to ask you this. Because sure. You've said this is your nickname, K-Boss.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know the spelling, Kory is spelled with a K. So I'm guessing that has something to do with a K. For those of you who are listening and can't see now, although you have to check out the Top CMO YouTube channel, and you can watch this too. But you have a necklace on, and then you're zooming into that right there that says K-Boss. So where does the name come from? You said people use it. Was that a self-generated nickname, or was that someone else? And what is the origin story?
So I've had many nicknames here. This is the one that had the stickiness factor, taking it back to Power Grip.
Yes.
And it is my team that named me K-Boss because I came in like a lightning bolt. Ideas, energy, passion, excitement for what was possible. So they were like, you're a boss. And they're like, you're K-Boss. And it just stuck. The other names that have surfaced that I super love, but they're definitely not as sticky as K-Boss, is they call me the Wizard of e.l.f. and the Chief Mother Elfer. So
Okay.
So we like to have a lot of fun in this organization, and the way in which we playfully and spiritedly call each other. And once K-Boss stuck, and now everybody in the company calls me K-Boss, including our board of directors, my team in LA made it into a nameplate. And what you can see in the nameplate is the name was actually generated with $2 instead of S's, because spending money is a core competency.
Okay. Well, there you go. And what is your superpower then that makes you especially suitable for this role? Is it the energy? Is it the willingness to sort of maybe tread where others dare not tread? Whether that's speed or trying things out or being comfortable with failure, what is your superpower?
I think it's creating a vision that people want to be a part of, inspiring them to realize that they can do things they never thought possible, and lifting them up all along the journey.
And what's next for e.l.f. and what's next for you? We're at a time when obviously we've come out of the pandemic, cultures shifting, workplaces shifting, generative AI is coming. How do you think about all of that in the context of being part of the e.l.f. community, having the community as part stakeholders? What are you thinking about now? What's the next disruptive moment you hope is on the horizon?
Well, I did hear in our preparation room that maybe I should be a podcaster. So I might want to take some tools, tips, and tricks from you. Maybe that's in the future. I think for
very
e.l.f.,
good. I could absolutely see that.
It's really fundamental that we stay true to the roots. And as long as we continue to do that, we just collect more and more things over time. Generative AI, the metaverse, all of these things that we're talking about, they're synapses and impulses that you collect with you along the journey. And I call that the power of accretion. That's how planets are formed. It starts small, and then you collect things, and it gets bigger and it's bigger and it's bigger and it's bigger. And eventually it creates a planet that is the whole is bigger than the sum of its parts. And that's really what we're doing here. But fundamentally at the core of that, it's about disrupting norms, shaping culture, and connecting communities through positivity, inclusivity, and accessibility. And as long as we leave that really solid at the core of everything we do, we can stand the test of time. We can stand the series of crises. And we have to have that continuous path of learning. We have to have the curiosity. We have to leave the egos at the door and be humble and hungry. And as long as we continue to hold those things precious, I think we will continue to be the greatest story ever written in the history of beauty and beyond.
And what do you take with you finally as you move forward from all the beauty brands you've worked with in the past? I know you're someone who sort of has taken a kernel or taken a truth, and you've been at a number of brands previously, I think in the Shiseido portfolio, a number of brands there. What from each of those brands do you take with you, even in this sort of like new disruptive packaging of e.l.f.?
If you are a true brand builder at the heart, you feel and you really internalize. You operate a brand with head, heart, and soul. And if I think about what made it possible, what needed to be true for the transformation at e.l.f., a lot of it is the ladder of experiences that I had before I got here. And each brand that I worked on, I took something that was fundamental that lives in my core. So if I think about Jean-Paul Gaultier, which is a brand I worked on for years at the early phase of my career, he was the ultimate rule breaker, anti-conformist. His mantra was "and why not?" If I think about Issey Miyake and what I learned there, I learned about true innovation, spending time with things you don't know. Issey Miyake used to say that an innovator's mission is 2121 because perfect sight is 2020. Your job is to see beyond that. So this real spirit of being inquisitive. From Hermes that I worked on for years, I have orange blood in my veins. I really learned about captivating storytelling, how to wrap a story around the incredible things that you're doing so that other people want to come along with you for the journey. Bare Minerals is really the start of social media. Leslie Blodgett, who is the founder of that brand, was all about that one-to-one connection and communication. I took that with me. At Burberry, I learned about digital disruption as a mindset. It was embedded inside the culture. So if you just think about that ladder of anti-conformity, curiosity, storytelling, social media, digital disruption, you find this incredible amalgamation at what we've been able to do at e.l.f. And I would really challenge everybody to be very reflective about their journey and the incredible things that you pick up that others put down that you can take with you in your increasingly growing tool chest, because you're going to need all of it and then some as you go along the journey.
According to Kory Marchisotto, aka K-Boss, e.l.f. Beauty's success has been all about challenging the status quo and staying true to its roots of disruption. To stand out, highlight your differences. If you're a challenger brand, why not cut against the current trends and do what the rest of the industry doesn't dare to do? Who says there's just one be-all and end-all strategy? To fuel this effort, reach out to your audience as partners in the building of the brand. Allow them to shape the values and direction of your company in real time as trends and needs change. And don't be afraid to take risks and fail. Have a bias for action. Fortune favors the bold. Like Kory Marchisotto, remember that the most significant disruptions sometimes start with a simple question. Why the e.l.f. not? For Top CMO, I'm Ben Kaplan.